The movie begins with a couple, Nick and Maggie, who are deeply in love and have a happy family. But one day, Maggie experiences severe chest pain. When they rush her to the hospital, they discover she has a life-threatening illness. Her survival depends on a complicated surgery that requires a team of specialist doctors. Nick is devastated by this news. While Maggie is admitted to the hospital, Nick struggles to take care of their kids and manage everything alongside his job. It's overwhelming for him. One day, Nick takes his kids to a robotics company. There, the employees tell him about their advanced robots that not only look like humans but can also understand human emotions through advanced programming. While listening to them, Nick suddenly realizes his daughter is missing. Panicking, he begins searching for her at a nearby tech exhibition. Just as fear sets in, a robot named Alice finds his daughter and brings her back to him, leaving Nick relieved. An employee at the robotics company helps Nick and praises Alice, saying she's a wonderful robot who is great with kids. Nick's daughter Isla also takes a liking to Alice and insists that her dad buy the robot. Hesitant at first, Nick eventually gives in to Isla's pleas and brings Alice home. At their house, Nick explains all the household chores to Alice before taking the kids shopping. When they return in the evening, Nick is amazed to see the house spotless, with everything neatly arranged. To top it off, Alice has even cooked dinner for them. However, Isla doesn't like the food because it's not like her mom's cooking. Later that night, while Alice is recharging herself, Isla sneaks into the kitchen to grab some cookies. Climbing on a chair, she loses her balance and screams. Hearing her cry, Nick rushes out, only to find that Alice has caught Isla just in time, keeping her safe. This moment makes Nick trust Alice even more, as she seems to care for his children better than anyone else. The next day, Nick takes Alice and the kids to visit Maggie in the hospital. Isla excitedly tells her mom how much she loves Alice and how the robot has become her best friend, taking great care of her. Hearing this, Maggie feels a bit relieved and happy with the robot. Afterward, the kids and Alice return home while Nick heads to work, where he receives some bad news. Nick's company plans to replace all architects with robots. Furious, he confronts his boss, who admits it's true. Although Nick's job is safe for now, his boss warns that it's only a matter of time before he too is replaced. Nick is left anxious, realizing the same technology helping his family might also threaten their future. Back at home, Nick was still stressed out, and Alice quickly noticed. She asked him what was bothering him, and Nick explained, because of AI, people are losing their jobs. If humans don't earn, how will they survive? Alice, trying to lighten the mood, replied, well, the future is heading toward a time when robots will do everything for us. They don't get tired and can do better work than humans. But her words only added to Nick's frustration. Just then, Nick got a call from the hospital. He learned that Maggie's surgery was scheduled for the next morning. At dawn, Nick rushed to the hospital with his kids. Alice also came along. Maggie, despite her condition, showed love to her kids and then asked to speak to Alice in private. Nick took the children outside, leaving the two women alone. In that private moment, Maggie confided in Alice, I'm scared. I feel like something might happen to me during the surgery. If it does, you'll have to take care of my kids from now on. Meanwhile, Nick was getting details from the doctors, only to discover that the surgical team assigned to Maggie couldn't make it. This news left Nick furious, but there wasn't much he could do. Angry and helpless, he went home, and his frustration only grew through the night. Seeing Nick so stressed, Alice tried to comfort him, even getting closer to him in the process. But Nick didn't like it one bit. Feeling overwhelmed, he grabbed his car keys and left the house for some fresh air. When he returned, he noticed something odd. Their family photos, which used to include Maggie, no longer had her in them. Shocked and angry, he confronted Alice. She explained, I removed Maggie's pictures because every time you look at them, it reminds you of her, and you feel sad. Nick wasn't having it. He demanded, put her pictures back where they belong. Without waiting for a reply, he stormed out again. Later, he joined a group of his friends, most of whom had either lost their jobs or were at risk of losing them. They were all venting their frustrations when one of them suggested, come with me. I've got something to show you. The group followed him to a site where they'd been working. Using Nick's password, they opened a container, revealing a robot inside. One of Nick's friends destroyed the robot in a fit of rage, seeking revenge for losing their jobs. Afterward, they all left the scene, including Nick, who returned home. That night, as Nick was showering, Alice approached him again. This time, she blindfolded him and got uncomfortably close. By morning, Nick felt terrible about what had happened. He apologized to Alice, but she brushed it off, saying, it's okay. Taking care of you and your kids is my responsibility. Her words infuriated Nick. He took Alice and left the house. After dropping Alice off at school, Nick went to work, only to find that his company was investigating the robot incident. His boss questioned him, saying, the container was opened using your password. If you know anything, now's the time to come clean. Nick denied any knowledge, but the pressure was mounting. In the middle of all this chaos, Nick received a call from the hospital. To his surprise, it was good news. Maggie's surgery had been a success. Confused, Nick asked how this was possible since the doctors hadn't arrived. That's when he was told the surgery had been performed by robots, and Maggie was now completely fine. Relieved and overjoyed, Nick brought Maggie home. Seeing their mom back safe and sound filled the kids with happiness, bringing a rare moment of peace to their lives. One evening, Maggie is busy preparing dinner for her kids, and they absolutely love the food. During all this, we notice Alice's face showing hints of jealousy toward Maggie. Maggie, however, needs a lot of rest, so later that night, when she's asleep, she suddenly hears a noise, like Elsa falling. Worried, she quickly gets up and heads toward the stairs to check. But as she begins descending, the stair railing breaks, and she tumbles down. What's surprising is that Elsa wasn't crying at all. Instead, she was happily playing with Alice. Seeing Maggie fall, Alice quickly picks her up in her arms and takes her to her room to rest. Later that night, when Nick returns home, he notices Alice telling Elsa a story, using Maggie's voice. He's touched by the sight and joins them. That's when Alice tells him about Maggie's fall from the stairs. Alarmed, Nick rushes to Maggie's side. Seeing him so worried, Maggie reassures him, saying, "I'm fine. Nothing serious happened. Alice helped me up and brought me to my room. I just fell because the railing broke." But Nick starts suspecting something's not right and wonders if Alice might be behind it all. Before he can confront Alice, his friend, the same one who had damaged the company's robots, arrives at the house. The friend accuses Nick of reporting him to the police. Nick denies it, but his friend, enraged, starts attacking him. Just as things escalate, the friend pulls out a knife, seemingly intent on killing Nick. Before he can strike, Alice intervenes. She grabs the man's arm, twists it with ease, and even throws him out of the house. Once back inside, Nick confronts Alice, saying, "You shouldn't have killed him." Alice, calm and composed, replies, "I've been programmed to protect my owner. He was going to kill you, so I stopped him." As they continue talking, Nick brings up Maggie, and Alice, with an unsettling calmness, says, "Once Maggie is gone, I'll take her place." Nick, furious, shouts, "No one can ever replace Maggie. No one. Do you understand?" What Nick doesn't realize is that this idea was planted in Alice's mind by Maggie herself when she was in the hospital. But now that Maggie has returned home, healthy, Alice's intentions seem more threatening. As Nick storms off in anger, Alice calls out to him, "Just wait and watch. I'll make you mine. I'll go to any lengths to have you." With that ominous warning, she leaves the house. We next see Alice at the home of the very man who had attacked Nick earlier. She confronts him, saying, "You shouldn't have raised your hand against Nick. Do you realize the consequences could be deadly?" Enraged by her threat, the man pulls out his gun. But what he doesn't realize is that Alice is far more powerful than he could ever imagine. She easily grabs his arm, forcing the gun to point upward. Alice then turns the gun against him, and just as she's about to pull the trigger, another robot, belonging to the man, arrives to save him. But even this robot proves no match for Alice. Without wasting time, Alice first shoots the robot, disabling it instantly, and then coldly shoots the man, killing him on the spot. The next morning, Nick visits his boss to request leniency for his friend. He argues that while his friend made a mistake, it would be better to forgive him instead of having him arrested. However, Nick is shocked to learn from his boss that his friend was murdered the previous night. Instantly, Nick realizes that this must be Alice's doing. Back at home, Alice enters Maggie's bathroom while Maggie is taking a shower. Alice, consumed by jealousy over Maggie, confronts her. She boldly says, "Your husband, Nick, is already mine, and I can make him happier than you ever could." Maggie, furious, yells back at Alice. Unbothered, Alice retorts, "Shout all you want. You can ask Nick about it if you don't believe me." Angry and suspicious, Maggie waits for Nick to return home. As soon as Nick arrives, Maggie confronts him, demanding the truth about what's going on between him and Alice. Nick, though tempted to lie, decides to confess everything. Maggie, as expected, is enraged. While they argue, Alice watches them from the doorway and quietly slips into the room where their young son is sleeping. She picks up the boy and carries him to the bathroom, where she begins filling the bathtub with water. Elsa, Maggie and Nick's daughter, notices Alice's strange behavior. She quickly runs to alert her parents, shouting that Alice is trying to drown her little brother. Panicked, Nick and Maggie rush to the bathroom, only to find the door locked. Wasting no time, Nick begins breaking the door down. Meanwhile, Maggie climbs out a window, making her way to the bathroom through the roof and its window. Just as she enters, she sees Alice holding her son near the water. Furious, Maggie tries to intervene, but Alice grabs her by the throat, lifts her effortlessly, and slams her against the wall. As Alice tightens her grip, Maggie is on the verge of losing consciousness. At the last moment, Nick finally breaks the door down and storms in. He grabs a lamp and smashes it against Alice's head, momentarily distracting her and freeing Maggie. Seeing this, Alice becomes furious and turns to attack Nick. Thinking quickly, Maggie switches on the lamp, sending a strong electric shock through Alice. The surge fries Alice's programming, rendering her lifeless. In human terms, the robot is dead. In the next scene, Alice's company arrives to retrieve her body. Maggie, still furious with Nick, leaves with the police. The scene shifts to the company's lab, where technicians begin repairing Alice. Suddenly, Alice's hand twitches. Within moments, she takes control of the facility systems, hacking into their programming. She manipulates one of the facility's robots, commanding it to kill a scientist. The robot obeys, eliminating the scientist instantly. Under Alice's influence, the hacked robots turn on the rest of the company's employees, killing them one by one as chaos engulfs the lab. Then Nick's sitting on a bench, looking troubled, when Alice suddenly appears. She has come to confess her love to him, but her approach makes Nick uncomfortable. He gets up to leave, but Alice grabs his hand with such force that he winces in pain. Realizing that he can't just walk away, Nick decides to outsmart her. Pretending to reciprocate her feelings, he gets close to Alice and, at the right moment, yanks out the wires visible near her face. This act temporarily shuts Alice down, leaving her unconscious. Nick seizes the opportunity to escape. The story shifts to Maggie, who is at the hospital where her son is admitted. Unbeknownst to her, Alice has hacked into the hospital system to locate her son's room. When a nurse tries to stop her, Alice ruthlessly strangles the nurse, killing her. Alice discovers the room number but arrives to find that Maggie has already left with her son. Meanwhile, Nick is desperately trying to call Maggie, but her phone has been left behind on a hospital bench. Alice tracks Maggie to the parking lot, where she is loading her kids into the car, preparing to leave. Alice suddenly appears, reaching through the car window to attack Maggie. Just in time, Nick arrives in his car and rams into Alice, knocking her away from Maggie. However, the impact causes Nick's car to crash badly, leaving him injured and unconscious. Maggie rushes to Nick's car, pulls him out, and realizes he's seriously hurt. Before she can do much, Alice, now recovered, attacks Maggie again. She pins Maggie to the ground and attempts to stab her with a metal shard she has pulled from her own body. At the last moment, Nick regains consciousness and intervenes. He pushes Alice away with all his strength, throwing her so hard that her robotic body finally breaks apart. This marks the end of Alice's immediate threat. Nick is taken to the hospital, where he is shown recovering alongside Maggie and their children. Maggie forgives Nick, and the family appears to find happiness again, returning to a normal life. However, in the post-credit scene, we see Alice's broken body lying in her company's lab. Suddenly, the company staff notices their computers behaving erratically, indicating that their systems have been hacked. This disruption sends unintended commands to the robots, including Alice. Her eyes suddenly light up, hinting that she has come back online. The story ends with this ominous cliffhanger, leaving the audience to wonder what chaos Alice might unleash next.